Happy N7 Day everybody, I hope you are having a swell Mass Effect day. Today I am celebrating one of my absolutely favourite franchises by looking ahead and delving into my own opinionated discussion based video exploring 7 things that I would like to see in the next Mass Effect game. So just like my Dragon Age discussion series, I want to create a sequel to this video by throwing this conversation at the community and compiling at least 60 of your unique, funny and exciting ideas for the next Mass Effect game. So while you're watching this video and seeing what I want for the next game, have a ponder on what you would like to see and let me know down below in those comments for a chance to be featured in my community video. You can be as broad, silly, funny, stupid as you want to be. So be sure to comment any of your ideas down below. The most exciting thing about the next Mass Effect is the possibilities are endless, so I expect your comments to be endless too. But without further ado, here are 7 things that I would like to see in the next Mass Effect game. Let's start this with probably my biggest wish for Mass Effect Next. And it's quite a divisive one if I do say so. I'd like the next Mass Effect to have a huge connection to Andromeda. So as much as I expect the next Mass Effect to be a fantastical and nostalgic return to the Milky Way, with Liara's prominent return and everything else that the trilogy's original galaxy had to offer, like its bountiful alien races, divisive factions, and exotic locales, to that end, I don't want everything that Mass Effect Andromeda cultivated to go to waste. In my opinion, Andromeda was filled with spectacular and intriguing storylines. Its narrative contained many ripe mysteries and plot beats that I feel would be an absolute shame if just dumped away and never iterated on. Like, for example, the Andromeda Initiative's secret benefactor and their ties to Cerberus, even Cora Harper's true identity, Ryder's family ties, and the culmination of organic and artificial life with Sam and Ryder's connection, and even the Ket and their mass population conquest. And that's just the major plot lines. There was also the rest of the arcs, like the Quarian arc, and the development of society and life in Andromeda, even Ryder's future, and the Angara and the Remnant. There were so many grand and mysteriously intriguing mysteries that unfortunately seem like they're going to be scrapped and just thrown in the dustbin. And so here is where my wish comes in, because I would like at least a few of these narratives to be featured heavily in the next game's narrative. Let's say with a bit of magic from quantal entanglement and Liara's connection, given that Liara did connect with the Andromeda Initiative, specifically Dad Ryder. Let's say we have a universe in a couple hundred years in the future where Andromeda has developed enough and the Milky Way have developed, and they both can communicate with each other through some sort of quantum entanglement. Maybe both galaxies have built their own independent Mass Effect relays and there can be transportation between the 2 galaxies. And then the player can even travel between galaxies in some sort of grand scale Mass Effect game. While I do realise that is asking for a lot, even with that quantum entanglement idea, we could have major connections to characters in Andromeda. We could have future Angara characters, future Riders, and just even more establishment of the lore and what happened after Ryder's legacy. We could have characters like the Angara and like the Remnant, and they could actually arrive at the Milky Way and they can then feature themselves in the next game's narrative. And we can uncover those mysteries of what happened. Maybe we don't see what happened or what played out, but we can have that in lore codexes, or characters can explore that or tell us, or we can see the outcomes of what happened there. Like if Cerberus did fund the Andromeda Initiative, what happened to the Andromeda Initiative? Did it become a Cerberus-like organization in Andromeda? Could we see those side effects happen in the Milky Way? What about Sam and their connection to Ryder? One of the biggest plot lines. One of the whole reasons the Reapers destroyed organic life is because they believed, or they were programmed, that organic and artificial life could not coexist together. Yet Sam clearly disproves that. That is a huge revelation right there, and I would like to know what happened to that connection. Could we have some sort of storyline about that in the future? Could those plot lines arrive again in the Milky Way? It's stuff that I would love to see. It's everything that I want to happen. And in the same vein as keeping in line with Andromeda, yes, Andromeda did have faults in certain places, but its combat was fantastic. So I would say keep a lot of Andromeda's combat intact and just improve upon that for the next Mass Effect, because it really was fantastic and so fun. Anyway, yes, huge connections to Andromeda. BioWare, please do not forget about Andromeda, the world, the lore, and the characters that you built up in these games. I think it would be a huge disservice to fans who love both the trilogy and Andromeda if they just decided to consider everything Andromeda did irrelevant. I say let's build on both galaxies for the future. Anyway, moving on, the next wish I have for Mass Effect Next is for it to feel like a Mass Effect game. So yes, in contrast to Andromeda, I want Mass Effect Next to actually feel like a Mass Effect game, which I know is a rather subjective take because definitively what makes and defines a Mass Effect game? We each harbour many different reasons why we love Mass Effect. Is it the amazing characters who join the journey and we fall in love with? Or is it the grandiose narrative with an incredible Lovecraftian evil that intense, pressured story? Or is it the Paragon and Renegade system that allows us to actually have choices and consequences, along with unique, beautiful dialogue? Or is it the incredibly human stories told within the entire game? What was it about Andromeda that lacked that Mass Effect feel, and how can we realize that feel and have it incorporated into Mass Effect next? While I do enjoy Andromeda now, I still have plenty of criticisms on the game overall, and I realize that comes from plenty of reasons. It's open world dynamic, this new youthful protagonist, and I think that the biggest one is the fact that it was just a new development studio within BioWare who had never worked on Mass Effect before. BioWare need to capture what made the original trilogy great, and also the aspects of what made Andromeda great. The next Mass Effect game needs to feel like Mass Effect in order for it to succeed. That is the ultimate downfall of Andromeda. While it's an enjoyable game, in my opinion, it doesn't feel like a Mass Effect game. It just feels like a new sci-fi IP, not an actual Mass Effect experience built by BioWare. And that's where a lot of my critiques come from. So how can the next Mass Effect game achieve this? Well, we do already have Liara somewhat involved in the next narrative. Let's have other trilogy characters who are still alive join this journey. Rex, Grunt, Edie if she still exists. If possible, even Shepard as an AI. Let's hear about the characters from the trilogy. What happened to them? What legacy did they go on to live? The best thing about the trilogy is its characters, hands down in my opinion. Let's bring as many of them back with developed plot lines and stories since, if at all possible, because I know a lot of them can die. But there are plenty of ways that BioWare could bring them back. But let's also witness the progression of stories that started in the Milky Way. However, now 600 years or whatever else later, now having a solid conclusion. For example, what happened to Cerberus without the Elusive Man? What happened to the genophage if it was cured, if it wasn't? How have the Milky Way alien races developed since? What happened to the Citadel? Have any new alien races joined the Council? Do we have new races that have discovered the Milky Way galaxy? What about the mass relays? And what was said about Shepard's legacy? If we're going back to the Milky Way, which I'm pretty sure we are, there needs to also be a huge connection to the original trilogy, a spark to reignite the love that each of us had for the original games. Yet with major developments and even newer stories to tell, new ground to cover in an already established universe. Moving on to a pretty self-explanatory wish. Probably one of the biggest wild things I want for the next game is the ability to play as one of Mass Effect's many different alien races. Exactly like Dragon Age Origins, where you have many different origin stories and different races and characters to play as, I would like the same treatment for Mass Effect. Currently in Dragon Age at the moment, you can play as up to 4 different races: human, dwarf, elf and Qunari, each different with their body dynamics and proportions, and also up to 4 different voices, 2 male and 2 female. It's a spectacular feature and really allows for players to create a very specific and creative Inquisitor. Now, I totally get that Mass Effect has always been about humanity's progression throughout space conquest, and we can all relate to that because obviously we're all human. But I do think it's time to divulge many different alien races as the protagonist now. Of course, a lot of this wish does depend on what BioWare want to do with the next game's story. What stories are they going to tell? Are we still sticking to that humanity space conquest feel? If they are sticking with that human-centered story, then of course it makes sense why we wouldn't be able to play as different races. However, I do feel like it would be a fantastic departure to finally allow the players to choose between a couple of races, from Asari to Turians, and embarking on a new journey with a completely different protagonist. This entire wish comes from many years of me and my squad playing Mass Effect 3's multiplayer and just dreaming about what it would be like to roleplay as one of the game's many alien races in a full-on spin-off narrative. A completely different approach to a Mass Effect game, yet still integral to its roots. You know, I've had loads of ideas in the past. What if we were anti-heroes like an Asari who grew up on Omega, and we have somewhat of a smaller space adventure, yet we get to be some sort of anti-hero Guardians of the Galaxy-esque kind of protagonist. But even so, with the current speculated narrative of the next game with Liara and the remnant of the Reapers and the Milky Way and somewhat Andromeda's connection, we could still play as a different race containing that story. I love humanity and I love the Mass Effect games distinct human stories, but I do think it would be fantastic if we could finally have a shake-up and play as one of the trilogy's main alien races. It would be such a fun experience. Anyhow, speaking of wild, something I'd like to see is a somewhat Wild West narrative approach. One of the early preconceptions I had for Mass Effect Andromeda was a Wild West approach to its narrative given its marketing. I used to make loads of Andromeda videos on my Kindle tablet back in 2016, which are now either unlisted or deleted because they were pure cringe. Maybe I'll do a retrospective one time time looking at them and seeing my scripts in the past, but back in those days, I dreamed about this Wild West dynamic for the next Mass Effect game, and that was because Johnny Cash's Ghost Riders in the Sky was played during one of the early trailers of Andromeda. And based on that trailer, I assumed this Wild Western approach to the game, a dangerous world, frontier-like escapade, where worlds are barely uninhabited, and there's constant conflict between smaller settlements, and as a main character on an epic journey, like Mandalorian and Star Wars, that Wild West sci-fi vibe. And I think now that you look at Andromeda, it was kind of a decent guess to make, given that you were the Pathfinder, you were discovering new life and searching for livable planets for humanity and company. This kind of Wild Western feel of unknown territory and you going out there against many different rivals, not knowing what the outcome could be, creating new laws and building your own community. Now unfortunately Andromeda didn't get to do that, but I feel like with the defeat of the Reapers, perhaps the Milky Way has turned into its own Wild Western frontier. You know, if all the mass relays were destroyed and many people were locked into certain systems like the Sol system, given the Reapers' invasion, there could be clusters of the universe that are completely populated with tons of people and others completely empty. Not to mention the Reapers did slaughter thousands of individuals before they were defeated, thus also having this desolated feel given the population decrease. So maybe the Milky Way galaxy has reverted back in its own ways, de-evolving slightly while they try to repair the mass relays. Maybe there is this western frontier where because they've adapted for so many years of each other, they've built their own settlements and there's this rivalry between them. Maybe we need a new hero to come in here and to kind of build those communities up again. Or maybe the new hero could be the one to build the first mass relay. Maybe that's the main quest line along with Liara, as we scavenge Reaper parts and attempt to connect with the rest of the galaxies. A great way to end the game could be literally a connection to the Andromeda galaxy, or the introduction of a new threat. Maybe you've actually finally built a great community and it's kind of a wholesome narrative until the very end when the threat arrives because you've built the first mass relay in centuries. That to me is the sort of idea I get, but again it's just throwing it out there, but it's something that I would like to see, this kind of frontier-like approach. Not too much of that Star Wars thing because I do enjoy the fact that Mass Effect does its own thing, but it would make sense with the next game and the current direction of Mass Effect. Anyway, moving on to another slightly smaller dynamic, but something that I would love to see is Anthem's flying mechanics. This is strictly a gameplay feature or a gameplay system, but let's use Anthem's flying systems and pilot the next ship for a change. Or fly around like Anthem's Javelin suits across the world. Why not? BioWare have the technology right there, right now. And Andromeda's jetpacks were great to use. In fact, traversal in Andromeda was great. It was nice and smooth all round. Very fun to just jump around into the world and explore. Let's reuse both Andromeda and Anthem's mechanics for the next Mass Effect. Why not? Let's fly around the bigger worlds we have, or have just entire quests devoted to flying around through the map. Or personally take control of the new ship and fly it through the galaxies and systems. It would be an incredibly welcoming change while reusing highly praised mechanics from Anthem and Andromeda, taking the good out of those games and repurposing them for even greater mechanics. The next wish I have is a return to Mass Effect 1's style and approach. So I know that Andromeda tried to do this, and I want to give it credit there because it really attempted to fulfill this original Mass Effect feel, that you're an explorer and you have an entire new frontier to discover with tremendous curiosities and lore to unearth. And I respect what Andromeda did, and I would kind of like the next Mass Effect game to do that too. But even more than that, Mass Effect 1 has recently become my favourite entry since replaying it again with Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I've discovered so much love for that game with its reworked combat and graphical improvements. When I played it before, you know, I loved it, but the combat, it really did hold that game down. But of course, back in the day we pushed through with Mass Effect 1 because its story was so bloody epic and the characters were amazing. But now that it's had those improvements, the game is just my absolute favourite because now its combat and story are just phenomenal. There are so many systems in Mass Effect 1 that were removed in the future. And I get it, Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 wanted to follow this more action-adventure approach as opposed to this strictly RPG experience. It still has those RPG experiences, but not as much as it did in the original. Things like choosing your squad's gear. I loved that in Mass Effect 1. In the follow-up games, our characters just had a set look and armor statistic, whereas in the original you could really change that and spec into different gear, specking into mods, specking into different guns. And there was a greater RPG focus, especially in side content, where we had meaningful exploration. There were many morally ambiguous side missions where you actually had to think and tackle that with the Paragon and Renegade system. Yes, you know, you had a few collectibles like finding the monkeys and finding rocks and what have you, but there were so many others where you were embarking on those planets that had these actual full-on choice and consequence dynamics. Even the combat of Mass Effect 1, it was difficult and required skill and prowess. And while it did have these nonsense open worlds, the exploration felt meaningful. So following that, I would say the next Mass Effect needs to kind of just get rid of this open world nonsense that it's been doing and that BioWare have been doing since Inquisition, because it just hasn't worked. It didn't work in Inquisition, it didn't work in Anthem, it didn't work in Andromeda. Hopefully it's not going to be in DF4, but it's certainly not going to work in the next Mass Effect game, because I'm sorry to say, but BioWare just have not learned how to build a fulfilling and epic open world with enjoyable side content. Fetch quests are not fun, nobody likes fetch quests. Speaking from Dragon Age Inquisition, the amount of times I've collected those shards and have self-loathed myself for doing that, spending over 200 hours doing it, I just do not enjoy it, and nobody enjoys it. It's fun when you do it for the first time and when you get little trinkets of lore, but doing it the second and the third time, yes, I get it, you don't have to do it, but when the world is just full of fetch quests and you kind of want to explore and embark on that side content and it's all fetch quests, it's not fun. So I'd say let's have the next Mass Effect game stick to a more linear with freedom approach. Yes, you can have these open worlds where you can fly around, you can explore them, and there's somewhat meaningful content to do, like the original trilogy, but they are not barren, open-ass huge worlds with nothing to do but fetch quests. So I would say stick to this original Mass Effect 1 approach. Linear with freedom, no open world nonsense, no fetch quests, instead morally ambiguous side content, or just scrap any side content and have a more of that RPG focus. The action adventure stuff is great, but this is Mass Effect and this is BioWare. Let's have those RPG systems make a huge epic return, especially when we're evolving into new next generation technology too. Anyway, the last thing that I would like to see for the next Mass Effect is a new threat. What comes next after the Reaper invasion? The next Mass Effect is in a tight spot. Nobody wants the next game to feel anticlimactic, and the Reapers have always satisfied that itch as a cataclysmic threat. They were the pinnacle of climatic. Yet at the same time, I do think that we've been there and kind of done that with the Reapers. As much as I loved their presence in the Mass Effect trilogy, I'd like to see a new threat. Something that we haven't seen before, or something less driven as the Reapers. Maybe even just a single Reaper is the main threat. I don't know, it's a hard territory that BioWare are entering. I do enjoy what Andromeda did with a new threat, because to be honest, and to give them credit, they didn't go by the typical route in giving us a single Reaper or a Reaper threat, or that it was the Reapers all along. No, they actually straight on went with a brand new villain being the Ket. And we didn't actually have a solid conclusion to the Ket, so they could even return in the future as a villain. I think something similar to the Ket and the Reapers that I would like is a multi-arched villain who, you know, you get the gist of them in the first game, more of them in the second game, and then you confront them properly in the third game. While that is sticking to the original trilogy a lot, I think it's what Andromeda was trying to build, and I like that approach with Mass Effect games. So we have a somewhat side villain, like a Saren-like, vigilante, whatever, and then we have this subversion of actually this is the real threat. Or maybe we can bring back Ryder and Sam and their culmination of artificial and organic life. Maybe that could be a sort of villain presence in the next Mass Effect game. Or maybe just something completely whack and out there. You know, BioWare created proper Lovecraftian villains for the trilogy. They definitely have the talent and the ambition to just go on full out there creating brand new whack villains. When it comes to BioWare, I do trust in their villain creation. Other than Kyleng and Corypheus, they've done a phenomenal job with villains. You know, just look at Loghain, the Elusive Man, Saren, the Reapers. They know what to do when it comes to villain crafting, so I would just say let them do whatever they want, because I think we could get something pretty spectacular judging the past. But yeah, I don't know, I think I'd like some sort of involvement with the Reapers and the Ket, maybe their technologies to come back, something like that, maybe even a single Reaper, a small amount of Ket, but just something brand new, something that can really just take us all by surprise, I guess. I feel like I want that Mass Effect 1 subversion twist again, where that conversation with Sovereign is just like, oh my lord, what is this? This is scary, I am intimidated, and I love it at the same time. Regardless, that'll do it for my Mass Effect Next 7 wishes on N 7 day. Folks, now it is your turn. Let me know every single idea you want on the next Mass Effect game, and I will incorporate at least one of your ideas in my 60 things the community wants to see for the next Mass Effect. I'd say I'll give you around 2 weeks, let's say maybe the 20th, to get your ideas in, so you've at least got a decent chunk, obviously, to watch this video and put them in the comments down below. With that, I hope you are having a very happy, fun, and 7 day. Mass Effect content is something that I will certainly steer into when we have more news and things to look at. But for the moment, I just hope that you're having an enjoyable Mass Effect day. But until the next one, folks, I've been Jackdaw, and I should go. Wahoo whoa, wahoo whoa.